How do we say to young people in particular who understand a bit of history, who in this country, they're often people who have had a different educational experience outside the state controlled ones, and they've got an inkling that actually our foundations were pretty remarkable and that we ought to be building on them, not destroying them. Let's offer them some hope, Victor.
Yeah, I'd like to. I think it's very exciting in history because these are cyclical processes. Of one generation, if I could go back to the farm, one immigrant comes in, he lives in a shack, he builds his farm. His son sort of has a nice car, but he builds a bigger barn than his home. The third generation doesn't know the grandfather and blows it and goes broke. That's sort of what happened in Athens. That's happening here. So our generation, the baby boomers, I think was that third generation that was self-indulgent and ruined the capital that it inherited from the World War II generation that was brought up by people who built the country. But it's very much more exciting to be back in the restoration generation, the first generation. So I think we can tell people, look at what you can see, look at what your parents, people like me, inherited, and look what they did with it. And don't do that. And you can reconstruct this country and this society and this civilization on the premises of a first generation that you're starting to rejuvenate, rebuild. And what do we mean by rejuvenate, rebuild? You're going to follow constitutional principles. You're going to restore the family. You're going to have reverence for the past. You're going to get away from that. You're going to be tolerant with people's errors. You're not going to judge a man good or bad by his worst qualities, but by his better qualities. You're not going to go back in history and cancel people out because they don't fit your contemporary ideas of morality. All of these are exciting things to think about and restore. And I agree with you. I see all of these young people, and there are millions now that are saying, you know what? This idea of staying single until you're 35 and then maybe living with somebody and then having all these degrees behind your name and then trying to network. There are a lot of people who say, I want to go get a house. I want to raise children. I want to believe in something. I want to make a community safe. I want to have a moral, tolerant society. And it may not be quite the same cycle as those who created the West in these cycles of first generation. But I think it's very exciting. I have two children that are in their 30s and they're married and have children. They have homes. And I'm always amazed when I talk to them how they are increasingly more traditional and conservative than I am. And they're saying that you don't know what, Dad, you have no idea what our generations is facing. And whether it's big debt or increased house price, they take it on with a gusto and they really want to be better than us. It's not going to be hard to do, but I think it is exciting. I have enormous hope with people 18 to 35. I just think that they're going to do something that's going to restore the West because they have no choice.
Jonathan Sachs found he did a major project before he died, a very fine gentleman, and he moved around, spent a long period of time moving around England. And he said to me that two things that interested him about young people was that many of them felt they hadn't been given a moral compass. So their substitute was to find an older person in their life that they admired and then emulate them. He said, and he found that dismaying that we haven't handed on a narrative, but good that they're smart enough to realise it and to find a substitute. I think that was the perspective he was putting. I'm not wanting to misrepresent him. So the other thing is, though, they know that it isn't going to be as easy for them. And I think my sort of final remark there would be that they need to be very careful. We know in Australia, 80% of young people now have climate change anxiety. Now, I'm a farmer. I'm worried about climate. I don't dismiss the importance of climate. But one thing I know for absolute certainty after years in public life is that catastrophism and self-loathing and a sense of despair and anxiety will never get you to a frame of mind where you say, we've got a challenge, let's go out and confront that challenge and deal with it rationally, sensibly, and courageously. You'll just go for emotion and destruction every time. And it really worries me.
Yeah, I was discussing that very anxiety last night on a television show, and it was about the virus. No sooner has the vaccination in miraculous fashion been created within 10 months, and we now are having 80 million vaccinated. and we have another 100 million with antibodies. And we all have to be absolutely careful about mutants, strains that could be dangerous. But as the caseload per day and as the deaths are falling dramatically, the official class is paranoid. It's saying to all of us, beware, you have to wear masks even if you're vaccinated, even if you have antibody, you can't change. And I was asked to respond to that. I thought for a second, because it kind of took me by surprise. As a military historian, I remember what George Patton said. He said, when he was told that the Third Army is not going to be able to fight the Wehrmacht, given their superiority in time, he said, never let yourself be a captive of your fears. And I think that's important. Yeah. And the other great general in American history, Ulysses S. Grant, in that terrible summer of 1864, when his subordinates came to him and said, Robert E. Lee's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and what are we going to do? And he said, I am sick and tired of hearing what Lee is going to do to us. I want you to think about what you're going to do to Lee. And I think that's the attitude we have to have, a sort of defiance. I'm sick of the virus. I want to know how we're going to kill it. And I want to get as many vaccinations and as best strategy, but we have to have confidence we're going to defeat it and get back to normal, rather than, as you say, be a captive of all these anxieties. And it applies to climate change, etc. That's why there's certain people in our society in the West, and Elon Musk, even if they're a flawed individual, you have to admire them. They look out at space, or if there's a climate change, then I'll build an electric vehicle. And some of these people in our society, I have enormous confidence in, because they have that Patton Grant defiance. And, it's like Danton, audacity, toujours l'audace. So always more audacity.
Well, I think too of the issue of character, and I had the privilege of speaking to Dan Crenshaw, who's a Republican, a young Republican member of Congress from Texas. And he said something that I thought was very revealing. And he said that, he picked it up in his years with the SEALs. He's obviously a very brave man. But he said, in public life, because it's so acrimonious and so dirty and nasty now, he is determined not to give offence to the best of his ability, and doubly determined not to take it. And I think for young people, especially in an age of social media, there's a brilliant insight in that. But what you've had to say is really encouraging. And thank you for your relentless drilling down into reality and then drawing such valuable lessons. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope many others do as well.
Thank you for having me again, John. Appreciate it. Say hello to your audience.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there, and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.